Hello, my name is Beck and welcome to a video where I talk about some of my anticipated releases, but this is also titled Auto by Authors because I wanted to talk about authors that I automatically buy books from when they come up with a new release, and that's pretty much what makes up this list, so I thought I may as well combine them both and make the best of both worlds really. So the first author that is on this list is actually Becky Chambers, and she is the author of the Wayfarer series. She's also the author of a short novella called To Be Taught If Fortunate, and she's actually coming out with a new book in 2021, so that is why she is the first on this list. She tends to write sci-fi that are very character deep and character focused, and while there is an overarching plot, it kind of happens at the background and the characters take up the forefront, and she tackles questions about humanity and existential crises and understanding yourself and your place in the universe. And she also tends to write sexuality and gender in a very open way, and it's just a beautiful way to write, and she really taps into what it means to be human, and that is why I love her work. And she's got a book called The Galaxy and the Ground Within coming out in 2021, and this is actually the continuation of the Wayfarers series. I don't know how Becky Chambers does it, but she just makes me feel so much for her characters in such a short space of time, so that is why she's first on this list. I'm highly anticipating The Galaxy and the Ground Within. It is one of my most anticipated releases of 2021. The next author on this list is actually Rick Riordan, and he is the author of all of the Percy Jackson books and all of the books following Percy Jackson that are set in the same world. And he actually, I don't believe, has a book projected for 2021, but he's kind of consistently released books every year so far. But I do know that this year in, I think, October is The Tower of Nero, and that is his newest release, and that is actually the last book in the Trials of Apollo series, and so I don't think he's writing any more Percy Jackson Olympians world after Trials of Apollo is finished. I hope he ends up writing more at some point in the future, but at the moment, during the timing of filming this video, I don't believe he's doing any more, so that's kind of like his last installment. But regardless, I really enjoy the way he writes. I love how he listens to fans, and I just really enjoy the dialogue he's got going. So obviously I'm going to pick up anything that he writes in the future, especially if it's mythology based, because I love my mythology. If there is noise in the background, there is a garbage truck outside or something, and so it's picking up on the microphone and I can't stop it, so I'm just gonna try and talk over it. The next book that I want to talk about is the Next in the Age of Madness series by Joe Abercrombie, and this is called The Beautiful Machine. Again, I don't really know too much about what this one involves, except that it follows the characters that were in A Little Hatred, and that is a book that's an installment in a series that is multiple books long. Even though it's the first in the Age of Madness series, it's not the first in the Blade itself or the first Law series. So the Blade itself is book one. So if you're going to go into this series, just know that it's grimdark. So it's got really grotesque themes of gore, violence, and sex, and it's also quite deeply character focused as well. So it does have a plot, but that doesn't really develop until you're into the second book in the trilogy. So I'd recommend that you read the trilogy first, get to know the characters, and then after you finish the trilogy, there are a bunch of standalone books that follow that, and then eventually you'll hit Age of Madness, and that is a series that I've personally enjoyed. In January, I gave A Little Hatred 5 out of 5 stars and adored it, and it actually made my favorite fantasy video, so go and check that out. I'll link it below. But then the next one I actually don't talk about that much because I read these books a very long time ago and I'm wondering if I need to do a reread to refresh my memory, but it is Samantha Shannon, and she is coming out with The Mask Falling, which is the next installment in the Bone Season series, and I feel like we've been waiting for a very long time for this one. The Bone Season, if you didn't know, follows a girl named Paige. She is a clairvoyant, and clairvoyance is actually a criminal offense in the world that she's living in. She's living in London, but it's like a Scion London, I think that's how you pronounce it, and it's dystopian but also kind of futuristic, and Paige actually gets kidnapped, taken off to this camp where she ends up meeting this guy named Riordan, and they try and break out of this camp. That is really all I can say. It's kind of a convoluted plot, but it sets up a lot of world building in book one, and it sets up all your key characters in book one. So I feel like I'm rambling, but this series is really hard to describe. So Paige is very headstrong. She's a clairvoyant. She's learning her powers. She's kidnapped, and then she meets Riordan. That's all you need to know really to go into the first book. So that is all I can really say, but it has become so detailed that I am very looking forward to The Mask Falling, because character arcs are closing and new ones are opening up, and I'm just very excited. I think that's like a later release in 2021, whereas the others on this list, most of them come out in February instead. So I've got a lot of reading to do. My year is kind of top heavy in 2021 with earlier releases rather than later ones. The next is V.E. Schwab, and she does come out with Addie LaRue in October in 2020, but she also is potentially coming out with a new book in 2021, and that is The Threads of Power, and that is actually a continuation of the Darker Shade of Magic series, the Shades of Magic series. She wrote that fantasy trilogy, and now I think some of the characters in that are going to be appearing in the next series. So all of the characters that survived in the first series are going to be in the next one, and that's all I really know about it. A Darker Shade of Magic follows a bunch of characters, mainly Kel and Leela. There are 3 or 4 different kinds of Londons, and they're really hard to traverse, but Kel actually has the power of blood magic, and so he can teleport himself to each different London to converse with the royalty there. And also while he's in one of the Londons, he comes across Leela Bard, and she is a thief, and she steals something very important from him. So that's how our 2 characters connect. There is also a prince in here, there's a few pirates, and it's just great. It's a lot of fun. So I really enjoyed that trilogy. I think I blasted through it in like couple of weeks, so I'm really looking forward to the next installment. I don't have any idea what it's going to involve, except probably elemental magic at some point, but that's it. I'm excited regardless. Then we have Empire of a Vampire by Jay Kristoff. This is a book that was supposed to come out in 2020, but he was like, I want to do the best by my fans and make this book the best it can be, so the release date got pushed back. But I kind of understand that. I want the book to be the best it can be as well, so that I can enjoy it the best that I can. So it is coming out, I think, in September in 2021, and I've had a bit of trouble with Jay Kristoff's releases lately. With Aurora Burning, his work written with his co-author Amy Kaufman, I found some character stuff in there to be very inconsistent, and it kind of did a similar thing in his other release, True Life, which I gave like 2.5 stars. It was his conclusion to his Lifelike series, and similar thing there, characters weren't very consistent, and they made decisions that didn't seem like they would as a character, but they did it for the plot so that the plot would work. And so that kind of disillusioned me a little bit with his work lately, because it seems to be falling into this pattern. And I hope that Empire of a Vampire doesn't do that, because it's dark, it's about vampires, it's basically everything I want, and I love that vampires are having a resurgence because I'm ready to embrace it. But there's something about his work lately that's just rubbed me the wrong way. So I'm really hoping that because Empire of a Vampire is not YA, that it kind of deviates from what has gone on lately. So I'm keeping my fingers crossed for that one. I will be getting it regardless and trying it out, but I just have my hopes and fingers crossed for it because I don't want it to be a letdown. Next is Brent Weeks, and I don't believe he's actually got anything coming up that I know of, but I am looking forward to whatever he writes anyway. I didn't really enjoy his Night Angel series. I stopped reading in the first book, but then his Lightbringer series has become one of my favorite fantasies ever, and it's a high fantasy. It follows Kip and a bunch of other characters, and the magic system revolves around light and color, and it's very deeply political, but it also has a lot of action in it and so much brilliant magic and world building. And honestly, it takes like 3 books build up to get to a one-liner of a joke in the last book, and there is so much detail in this series that I adored it, and I really want to recommend it to people because the way that Brent Weeks writes is actually really easy to grasp, and it's an easy entry point into high fantasy. So if you want to start a high fantasy, I would recommend The Black Prism, but I loved it obviously, and so anything else he writes, I want to make sure I pick up and support him because I really enjoy his writing. So that's why he's on this list, not necessarily because he has a new release coming out, but because I automatically will buy whatever he puts out next. The next book I'm so excited about because it's a new one by Sebastian de Castell, and it's called Play of Shadows, and it is a new Greatcoats book, but it doesn't necessarily follow the Greatcoats in like the Traitor's Blade series. It actually follows a different character altogether, and I'm just going to read the kind of synopsis-ish that I could find because I'm not going to be able to summarize this. It's already pretty neatly summarized. It says, when the grandson of 2 famous sword-wielding greatcoats flees a duel to hide out in a theatre, he unwittingly becomes a conduit for a spirit of the legendary Archduke, portrayed as a villain on the stage. Doesn't that just sound chaotic, ridiculous, and amazing? I am so excited about this because I am obsessed with the Greatcoats. I love their banter and I love the way that it was kind of like a Three Musketeers vibe, and the magic in the book doesn't really take place until a little bit further into the series, so you're given an opportunity to get like your setting and your footing in the world before you actually start to try and take on understanding of the magic system. I think it also comes out in February, so I don't have very long to wait. The next one, obviously, I couldn't do a video without mentioning him. It is Brandon Sanderson, but he is, I believe, wanting to come out with the next Skyward book or wanting to come out with the next Wax and Wayne book. And the Wax and Wayne book is actually the Mistborn book, but it's not the first era of Mistborn, it's the second era, which is 300 years later. It's got more developed technology, it's got guns and cars, and considering the magic relies on ingesting and burning metals so that you can control them, there's a lot more opportunity for catastrophe. And I am really anticipating the next Wax and Wayne book because he said he's been planning to write it for a while, but obviously he wanted to get past Stormlight first because they take him 2 years to write at least, and that is coming out in November. So he now has more time to write more Wax and Wayne, and I am very much hoping it is that book. If it's Skyward #3, then I also don't mind, but I liked Skyward and I liked Starsight okay. I liked Skyward a lot more, so I'm hoping the next Skyward book actually lives up to my expectations, but I know that Wax and Wayne will live up to my expectations. So anyway, Brandon Sanderson is on this list. I keep an eye on his work anyway, and I get his newsletter once or twice a year whenever he decides to send it out, because he does this thing where he updates you about all of the projects he's working on, so I'm sure at some point I'll be updated and this will be confirmed or not. The next one is Seanan Maguire, and I don't actually really follow many of her releases. It's mainly one series, and that is the Wayward Children series. Across Green Grass Fields, I think, is the next book that's coming up. I think it's the 5th book in this series. The 4th one was In an Absent Dream, and that has been my favourite so far, but this basically is a novella series. It follows a few different characters. Mostly it's set at like a magical school, so it's about kids who essentially go through a doorway and then come back to our reality, and they can't cope with the change because the world that they went to is often the world that fits them more seamlessly than our reality does. And so trying to assimilate back into our reality after they come back is a real big struggle. And so there's this school that the headmistress is actually someone who has been through a door and then come back and done it more than once. So she is aware of what her students are going through and she doesn't hold them back in any sense. And it's just like a safe place for these kids to go where they are understood. And I love the way that this kind of creates like a found family dynamic and a safe place again for these characters to reside. It's also got a lot of queer characters in it. It's got a lot of brilliant representation and it's just very heartfelt as well. So that is why I'm very much anticipating the next book. Also, they're really, really quick to get through. So that also helps. So I've only got 2 more, and the next one is Leigh Bardugo. I don't really follow Leigh Bardugo's releases, but for a particular series I do. So the next Alex Stern book is potentially coming out in 2021, and I really loved Ninth House. I actually did a spoiler vlog for it, so all of my thoughts are in that vlog, and I am really excited to read the sequel. I hope it comes out in 2021. I kind of checked Goodreads and it said that it was, but Goodreads can change all the time, so I don't know if that's fairly reliable. It is a dark academia book. It's got supernatural creatures. It's got Alex Stern who can see ghosts and interact with ghosts, and it's just so good. And the way it ended, I need the sequel as soon as possible. I think Leigh Bardugo did a very good job at writing a more adult work, because her young adult stuff, while it was enjoyable, it was personally not for me because it's not really what I reach for. But the Alex Stern series, the Ninth House book, just hit me in the perfect place, and now I'm very, very keen to read on. And then the last one on this list is actually Hank Green, and he wrote a duology that I absolutely adored. It had brilliant themes in there of finding meaning in your life, having the economy and power corrupted so that technology is used against you, because technology is very much ingratiated into what we interact with daily, and it just takes information from us without us even realizing it does. And so he really took his experience with parasocial relationships, because he's quite a big YouTuber, and he put that into a book, and these characters felt really well developed and well situated because they came from such deeper themes, and that is why I loved his books. The first one is a first contact with aliens story, and our main character April discovers this guy named Carl. He looks like a statue, and she does a video on him and then goes absolutely viral and does all these media interviews, and it escalates from that point on. I can't really say too much because obviously spoilers, but I loved both installments. Both books were kind of different from each other, but in a very good way. And so from that, I realized that I love Hank Green's writing because he's very considering about what he does. He does it very purposefully and it reads very authentically as well. So whatever he comes out with in the future, I'm likely going to pick up because I loved his duology. But that is the end of the video. These are all of the authors essentially that I will go and buy new releases from. Whether they're favorite authors of mine or not, I will go out regardless and give them a try, because if they've done something that I've loved in the past, then I'm willing to give them another shot basically. So these are all of the books that I am very excited about for 2021. Let me know if any of yours are aligned as well. I would like to know if we have some crossover in our interests. But thank you so much for watching this video. I'll talk to you in the comments and I'll catch you in my next video. Bye.